Mission accomplished.
Right. Good afternoon, committee, and welcome to any new members of the public joining the afternoon session of the Western and Southern Area Planning Committee meeting of the 8th of October 2020. I will now conduct a roll call of committee members to make sure you've all returned from lunch. Councillor Mike Barron?
Yes, I'm arrived, yes.
Councillor Dave Bolwell?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Kelvin Clayton?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Susan Cucking?
I'm here, Chair.
Thank you, Susan. Councillor Jean Dunseth?
I'm here, Chairman.
Thank you, Jean. Councillor Nick Ireland?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Louis O'Leary?
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Kate Weller?
Present.
Councillor Sarah Williams?
Present, Chair.
And Councillor John Worth.
Present, Chairman.
And we're all present and correct. Thank you, committee. We will be continuing the agenda as set out in your packs. And the first item in the afternoon session is item 5E. Report to committee to modify a planning permission under section 97 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 for the planning consent WP 1400330 OUT and WP 1600388 VOC, and finally WP 1900184 VOCKB. And that is for the redundant buildings at Bumpers Lane, Portland, DT5 1HY. I now invite Emma Telford, the case officer, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just check you can all see my screen?
Screen's up.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
So this item is to modify the planning permission under section 97 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 at the site Bumpers Lane, Portland. Committee will remember this site from the previous meeting. It came to committee last time to remove the affordable housing obligations, and that was due to viability and the cost of unforeseen contamination at the site. The site is outlined here in red. You've got Wakeham down here, and then this is Bumpers Lane, which the site is accessed off. The site benefits from both outline and reserved matters permissions. The site have commenced and a number of properties have been sold, and these pictures are showing examples of both units that have been sold and that are up for sale currently. As set out under section 1.1 of the officer's report, contamination conditions were included on those original permissions. To comply with those conditions, a compliance with condition application was submitted, and as part of that, WPA, contaminated land consultants, were consulted on the submitted information. As part of this, the developer, Betterment, worked with the council to amend the property deeds and information packs supplied to prohibit works which could compromise the various capping systems and remediation works undertaken at the site. Concerns were then raised whether this approach was enough to ensure all future buyers were aware of the potential risks of contamination. WPA confirmed that this is a sensitive site and owners should not be able to undertake works which compromise the various capping systems, as to do so would run the potential risk of releasing asbestos fibres. WPA confirmed that it was essential that certain PD rights were removed from the properties, as this would prevent accidental disturbance of the capping systems without prior input and control of the local planning authority and its experts in respect of contaminated land, and would provide protection to public health and the environment. The council could not enforce covenants in land transfers between developers and house purchasers. In the future, the developer may have no interest in enforcing these covenants either. We have received correspondence, and that is set out on the update sheet that was sent round this morning, the second update sheet, received from a representative for Betterment regarding the process and whether it's expedient, but also whether the process is expedient, but also that an Article 4 direction would be more appropriate. The council's legal team advised that an Article 4 direction would remove PD rights, whilst a condition can be more targeted. An Article 4 direction would not protect against works which do not constitute development. A condition, however, can prevent works that do not amount to development. A modification to this Section 106 was also looked into, but that would require all owners to join into the obligations. And as some of the plots have been sold, this was not a practical proposition. This leaves only the option of a planning condition. Given the amendments carried out by the developer to the deeds, and that properties have already been sold, the developer was not willing to submit an application under Section 73 of the Act. This meant that the only way the council can impose control is to modify the planning permission under Section 97, which is what we have in front of us today. Section 97 of the Act sets out that if it appears to a local or planning authority that it is expedient to revoke or modify any permission. The modification would include the new condition as shown on the screen now, to protect the health of the persons living at the properties. If this recommendation is agreed, under Section 98 of the Act, the order requires confirmation of the Secretary of State, and notice would be served on all relevant people, and they would be given time to make comments, which would then be considered by the Secretary of State. The developer and affected owners could claim compensation for the loss of the value of their properties, the amount of which is not known at this stage. However, there is already the private covenants to the similar effect, and they can still develop their properties provided they do not breach the proposed condition. It is therefore hoped that compensation, if any, would be limited. It is considered that the protection of health of future residents of the site is the paramount consideration. The recommendation, therefore, is that members agree to the modifying of the outline planning application and the VOC as set out on the screen to include the following condition and reason. Section 5 of the officer's report also refers to a Section 73 application WP 19-00184/VOC. This one has not yet been determined, although it has an officer recommendation of approval subject to the completion of a legal agreement. This application is therefore not before you for determination, but to indicate if you would support the imposition of the same condition as set out on the screen on that permission when it is subsequently approved. And that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Emma. That's very clear. Are there any questions of a technical nature for the case officer? No. Right, I now open the debate for members. Councillor Pike, is there anyone willing to speak?
No, Chairman.
Okay, in that case, I'm looking for a proposer.
We have Councillor Clayton right on the button, Chairman.
Sorry about this. It's really, I suppose, is a technical question. I just couldn't get my request to speak in time. What is the nature of the contamination that requires this? Is it possible to say?
I hand that back to the case officer, Emma.
So the risk is the potential for asbestos fibres within the soil.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor
Thank you.
Susan Coffin, Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Coggin.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I know this site very well. I think that anything that we can do to protect residents from any contamination that we should really support. You know, as more and more buildings are being built on landfilled or reclaimed land, and this was a quarry works and with buildings on it, as was another site on Portland, and I feel it's really important that we actually protect buyers now and future buyers from any contamination, whether it's asbestos or any other contamination that the council deemed fit to put a requirement on. So that's my thoughts are that I would propose that we accept this modification.
That's a proposal. Thank you.
Before you move for a seconder, Chairman, I have Councillor Dave Baldwin who wishes to speak.
Okay, Councillor Baldwin.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm sorry, like Councillor Clayton, sometimes it's difficult to hit the right button at the right time. Yeah, I just got a couple of questions on this, really. I've been reading through it and I noticed that you know, planning conditions 4, 5 and 6 were complied with and the covenants were agreed and implemented. Now, at the time, I take it that the contamination, they were aware of the contamination when these covenants were put in place on the deeds of the houses. Could you confirm that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll pass you back to the case officer, Councillor Emma Delford.
Yes, so the covenants were agreed as part of the compliance with condition application as a result of the information that was submitted as part of that.
Okay, thank you. Also 3.2, obviously some of these houses had already been built and occupied before any concerns were raised. I'm scratching my head over that one. Why did it take whatever length of time before the planning department realised that this would not be sufficient to safeguard people in the future?
At the time, obviously they submitted the compliance with condition application, and at that time, none of the properties were sold or occupied. But in the process of bringing this to committee, they have since been sold, not occupied, but been sold.
Okay. Right. So yeah, they could claim compensation is another thing that just caught my ear just now. Is this because of the fact they're no longer allowed to obviously do any development on the houses, permitted development, which could reduce the housing value?
So compensation can be claimed for any loss of value to the properties.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much.
And again, Chairman, before you move for a seconder, we have a seconder in Councillor John Worth, but Councillor Sarah Williams would like to speak.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a question regarding compensation, which has now been answered. So, and I was going to second the proposal after that. So, I'll let John second it.
Okay.
Okay, Chairman, you have a proposer and a seconder.
Before we continue, I want to ask the case officer about policing the condition and how we're going to control that those conditions are adhered to. Over to you, Emma.
Sorry, I couldn't mute myself in time. It would be the same kind of enforcement process as it would for any condition. And obviously the condition will require that if anyone wants to undertake such works as extensions, if they go below that 1 metre, that they would have to submit a planning application for that works.
Right. Okay.
Would that be dealt with under a separate planning application, Emma?
They would submit a full application for the said extension. It's to prevent anyone carrying out any works under PD or any works that would result in obviously digging down at below those depths.
Okay, so by definition, then, if somebody wanted to plant a tree in their garden, then they would have to ask for planning permission if it was below that 1 metre.
0.6.
I beg your pardon, 0.6 of a metre depth.
Oh,
Just to be clear.
I think obviously, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil or Anne, but I think for the planting of a tree, because that wouldn't be considered as development, they'd submit a section 73 application to vary the condition to be able to carry out those works.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that. Thank you, Emma. No further questions from members, Chairman.
Thank you, Will.
Proposer and a second.
And we've got a proposer and a seconder. No one else willing to speak, so I'm now going to do a roll call as to committee's decisions. So, Councillor Mike Bowen.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yeah, in favour, Chair.
For transparency, Councillor Susan Cocking.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jean Dunseth.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bill Pike.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Ireland.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Louis O'Leary.
For, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kate Weller.
For.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
For.
For transparency, please, Councillor John Worth.
For, Chairman.
And I'm also for. That's unanimous, Anne, is that correct?
Yes, it is, Chair. Yes, it's
Thank
approved.
you. Right, okay, committee. Oh, what happened? Oh, so my picture's come back now, so we're okay. That completes the list of planning applications directly, and now we'll go on to item 6 on the agenda, and that is to receive an update report or potential enforcement action on Homestead Farm, Main Street, Bothampton, Bridport, DT6 4BJ. And that's for the demolition of the original farmhouse and the erection of a dwelling not in accordance with planning approval WDD 17002888 as amended via the approved non-material amendment approvals WDD 19000355 NMA and WDD 19000624 NMA. And I'm going to invite Darren Rogers, the case officer, to introduce this item.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chairman and committee members. Just before I start the presentation, I'm aware that, of course, the Vice Chairman's a new member, and there may be another new member on committee as well. The planning application, the planning application that committee saw in August, and they resolved to refuse permission for. I'm going to go through that presentation again just shortly, but a couple of updates before I do that. First of all, on the update sheet, you will see that there were 2 emails that's been received from the applicant's agent about the works that officers agreed to post your committee decision in order to seek to try and get the site into a more stable and watertight condition prior to it being locked down pending a planning appeal against your committee's refusal of permission. There was an email on the update sheet dated the 30th of September which said that the applicants were endeavouring to get the site shut down as quickly as possible, and then an update on the 7th of October, which was yesterday, confirming that the site has been locked down, keys have been handed back to the applicants, save for any kind of visit occasionally to manage the house and the garden that's there. But also just an update that the council, Dorset Council's Highway Authority, given the high pavement opposite the site, are planning to do some works there. highway works, which will mean some loss of on-street car parking, but the applicants have agreed that some residents can use the car parking area that's available on the site for residents to park while that work is taking place. So that's a couple of the updates. The report also includes the schedule of works that officers, as I said, agreed to in order to get the site shut down post your committee decision and pending any planning appeal. If I now just briefly go back into the presentation. So can you see the screen, Chairman?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So just to remind people, or remind members of the application that they refused consent for. It was the site called Homestead Farm in Bothenhampton in the conservation area. Duck Street located here, Main Street located here, with terraced properties forming the historic part. And then this bit here is the raised footpath, which is what I've just alluded to in terms of Dorset Council having to carry out repairs. This is the site as was. So this was prior to the site's redevelopment and prior to the planning permission granted under the 2018 permission and varied by 2 non-material amendments. So it had this former structure fronting Main Street itself, with the house dropping down in 2 sections. And then you had the garden area at the rear, and access was located here. Just bear with me a second. And from the other end, this is the building itself, and you can see prior to its redevelopment, it was in a quite poor and dilapidated condition. This is the high pavement, just located here, just directly opposite the site. The building names of it were the old potting shed fronting Main Street. Then the main farmhouse itself, which dropped down, that was proposed. And then we had this kind of inverted Y approval given for the dairy barn living area linked via an entrance link, and bedroom cottage linked via bedroom link, with a garage at a lower level given the slope of the site. So that was the proposed site plan that you effectively refused permission for in August. And that was the rear aspect of the site, which was intended to be laid out as a garden cum private allotment for future occupiers. This is the photographs that you saw back in August, Chairman. So this is Duck Street here. This is the building as now built, and this is Duck Street that leads down. Duck Street is a private road. This was the building itself, so you can see from that previous shot of what existed, what has now been built. That's the greenhouse on the corner of Duck Street. This is the area where the applicants have now offered for the residents to park whilst the repairs along Main Street are being carried out as part of highway works. And I'll just briefly go through these photographs to remind members of the proposal that was before them in August. That was the village hall next door to it. That was the building, as you can see. That's the inverted Y. Just bear with me a second. Oops. This was the sunken garage, just located here. As you can see, located there. Again, Main Street elevation, back towards the corner of Duck Street again, and then we go down Duck Street, see the access that was leading into the rear garden area. Looking back up Duck Street, right hand side further down Duck Street, and then the access to the rear garden area is on the left hand side of the screen. That was Primrose Cottage opposite, and then that's looking back up Duck Street with the building as built on the right hand side of that photograph. Again, looking back up Duck Street. And then again, from within the site, this is where you've got the sunken garage at the lower level. Members remember they didn't refuse permission on highway grounds or parking grounds. It was purely and simply impact on character of the area and residents' amenity. And that's the high footpath directly opposite the site where some parking is going to be shortly removed because of repair works to it. This is the site plan. What I wanted to just briefly go through is to remind members of the as built and as approved situation because of the issue of what's in front of you in terms of any action to be taken from here on in. So the as built lower ground floor plan is that. The as approved lower ground floor plan is that. Very similar, but slightly different. And in terms of the changes, you can see that that was the green area there is the outline of what was approved compared to the black, which is actually what's built. And as you can see, if we've got Main Street located here, there's a swing of about 2 degrees that increases the length there of about 2.2 meters in terms of the outline as approved in green and, as I said, as built. So there's a very, very slight kink, and that's repeated as we go through the ground floor plans. So as an example here on the ground floor plan, that kink is shown in green, which is the outline of the as approved, compared to the black, which is as built. And as you can see, the frontage bit is not too dissimilar. There's just this little slight kink in the aspect at the rear. And again, as the first floor shows it there, you've got the first floor that indicates as approved, it was slightly larger, as built, slightly smaller. These were some of the as approved elevations fronting Main Street. Top two there. And as approved east and west elevations. As approved west and south elevations, and the as approved south elevation. And that's the north and west elevation. These are the main ones to focus on in terms of the comparison elevations. So green shows the building as approved, and the rest of it is as built. Again, green as approved, the rest of it as built. You can see that there is a slightly narrower frontage compared to the true elevation as approved. And again, showing you the differences in the as approved scheme compared to the as built scheme. So the as built scheme there, you can see, is slightly higher compared to the elevation of Dairy Barn that's located here in the garage. Again, northeast elevation showing the as approved compared to the as built scheme. Similarly, on the southeast elevation, the bottom bit shows the as approved, and that is slightly higher. And again, clearly indicating as built compared to as approved in green again. And again on the southwest elevation, which is located there. This is the southwest elevation, so you can just see these marginal and differences in terms of what previously got permission and what has been built. This one shows a slightly different difference depending upon where you are on your elevation drawings. And again, the northwest facing elevation showing as built compared to as approved. And again, showing the northwest facing elevation as approved compared to as existing. This is the northwest facing elevation. As approved, as built, and you can see the slight differences of what was approved here compared to the as built scheme. You looked at the access, you didn't refuse permission previously on the access, Chairman, but I've just included this because this is exactly what you saw last time. This was the Duck Street access, and the photographs I've previously indicated to you show where that is. That's been implemented. And then there's a whole host of these small ancillary structures located in the rear garden area, barbecue shelters, field shelters, tool and lawnmower stores, open wood and trailer store, compost bins and wood shed, and the greenhouse that was on the corner of Duck Street that I've showed you on the photographs. The materials, we went through those last time, Chairman, at your committee meeting in August. But we're now into the situation of considering enforcement action. But the applicant has indicated that they do intend to appeal your committee's decision. So it leaves committee with a number of options to consider. The first option is to not take enforcement action at this stage. And this would be because of the pending outcome of the Section 78 appeal, and that members also need to take account of the planning permission that's already been granted. Applicants have agreed, or sorry, have indicated that there will be an appeal. Of course, there would be delays that could occur if enforcement action is taken only after the planning appeal is determined in favour of the council. But if the outcome of any such appeal is that it's allowed and permission is granted, particularly bearing in mind that the case officer's recommendation was to approve, and that's not suggesting that any inspector would follow that recommendation, then no formal enforcement action would then be necessary. The other option, or the other part of this particular option of taking no enforcement action at this stage, is that an inspector's view on any subsequent planning appeal will also help to inform what formal enforcement action may be appropriate, if any, and particularly noting that when inspectors make their decisions, they often give a view in their formal decision letters as to which aspects of a development they consider acceptable and which are not. And therefore, by waiting for the outcome of any planning appeal, the council will have a more defensible position as regards to any formal enforcement action we then may decide to take. And of course, at that stage, the matter would be brought back to committee as soon as possible if permission is refused on the appeal. Your second option, Chairman, is that enforcement action be taken requiring the demolition of the whole building. As the report says, this would require demolition of the whole of the building as is now built, and that it be replaced with the dwelling as was approved under the original permission and as amended by the approved non-material amendment approvals. But officers' advice is that it would not be expedient to require demolition of the whole building, as it's capable of being altered to address the reasons for refusal of the of your permission, of your refused application, and more closely match the approved building. And of course, from an enforcement point of view, we always have to look at the issue of proportionality in terms of taking any action. Third option to be taken is to require specific alterations to the various elements. Officers here consider that the committee's reasons for refusal could be properly addressed by requiring only certain elements of the building are changed, such as the roof heights of the building as was approved compared to the height of the building as built, and or that the footprint of the building as built is altered to that of the footprint of the building as approved. But of course, that effectively goes towards the removal of the whole of the building because of the skewed aspects of that part of the as-built scheme compared to the as approved scheme based on the floor layout plans that I showed earlier. And then two other paragraphs. It's not considered that, for example, the vehicle access onto Main Street and Duck Street are unacceptable in planning terms, notwithstanding the fact that they're technically not in accordance with the approved scheme, because these are considered to be minor transgressions resulting in no significant planning harm to the character of the area, neighbour amenity or to highway safety. There were no highway objections, and it didn't form, those aspects didn't form a reason for refusal from your committee in August. And nor is it considered that the landscaping proposals to the main south of the building, that includes the ancillary structures that I've gone through, the heritage greenhouse, barbecue shelter, field shelter, etc., etc., as we don't feel that they raise any significant planning harm to the character of the area, and in fact were approved under a previous compliance with condition application. So on that basis, Chairman, we as officers are recommending that option 1 is approved and we hold in abeyance any formal enforcement action until such time as the Section 78 planning appeal is determined. We are on notice that they do intend to appeal the decision. As I understand it, that appeal is likely to be submitted quite soon. Whether it will be via the method of written representations, an informal hearing or a public inquiry remains to be seen. That's the applicant's option to be accepted or not accepted by the planning inspectorate. And the reason for option 1, Chairman, is that we feel that the any inspector's view on any subsequent planning appeal will help to inform what enforcement action may be appropriate. As I said, if any, particularly noting that the inspector often gives a view in their decision letters as to what aspects of a development they consider acceptable or not. And by waiting for the outcome of the appeal, we'll have a more defensible position as regards any enforcement action, if any is required, because, as I said, the appeal may be successful and the appeal may be allowed. So that's our recommendation, Chairman, for recommendation option 1.
Thank you, Dan. That's very comprehensive. I'm now going to invite Alison Sharp, welcome Alison to the meeting, to read out the written representations received from members of the public.
Rachel Stiles. I very much welcome Planning Committee's unanimous decision on 12 August to refuse planning permission for the development at Homestead Farm in Bothenhampton. I welcome too that the committee is considering enforcement action against the development and thank the committee for offering me the chance to comment. I very much hope such enforcement action can be taken now and not again deferred. After expert assessments commissioned by local residents, the council noted back in April 2019 that the development was not being built in accordance with the original planning permission. As the committee noted, it is too high, too near the road, it is overbearing and wholly unsympathetic with its surroundings, particularly as it lies amongst listed buildings and at the heart of a small historic village. The owners were told by the council at the time, in April 2019, that any further work would be at their own risk. This important point is not mentioned in the case officer's recent update report. They nevertheless continued with the development. Normal building work continues even today, the 1st of October. This is not the first opportunity the council has had to take enforcement action. The update report states that an enforcement investigation was opened back in January 2019. The council chose to defer enforcement action when the non-material amendments were refused in October 2019. Given the length of time action has been under consideration, and given the fact that this is a building in a sensitive location which has contravened planning regulations for well over a year, and which has caused a great deal of upset for many residents, enforcement action is long overdue. Further unnecessary delays would not be in anyone's interest. Enforcement action now would avoid this, enabling any appeals to be heard together rather than one after the other. Action is also arguably necessary in order to restore both the planning system's integrity and residents' battered confidence in it. Mike Best. This is a written submission in relation to item 6, potential enforcement action, Homestead Farm, Main Street, Bothenhampton, DT6 4BJ. Having read the update report regarding potential enforcement action, I am concerned that any action at this stage would be a misuse of process. It is normal to wait for the outcome of the appeal process before issuing an enforcement notice. There is an appeal underway and this is an arguable case for
I've
the
got to speak
building
any second. So.
to be retained despite the refusal to give planning permission, given the planning officer's positive recommendation at the committee meeting on 12th August. Because of this, I think that enforcement action would be premature. It also seems to me that the applicant could pursue costs against the council for unreasonable behaviour if this enforcement is granted. I was surprised that retrospective planning permission was refused and feel that the reasons given by the planning committee for refusal could be seen as partisan rather than objective. I hope very much that the appeal will be allowed to run its course, giving the applicant time to formulate an appeal and to make full use of independent experts. I hope that the portfolio holder for planning will bear these points in mind. I am a Bothenhampton resident. I have lived here for 20 years, and I believe that it is important for this to be resolved fairly as well as expeditiously. It seems to me that the applicant has worked hard to address the concerns of local residents in good faith. Simon Brodie.
Alison, could I interrupt just a second?
Yes.
Do you mind pausing just a second? Members, can you ensure that your microphones are on mute, please? A lot of noise is coming through and it's interrupting the meeting. So apologise for that. Alison, will you continue, please?
Yes, thank you. Simon Brodie. In the light of the unanimous refusal of the current application, it would be easy, but not reasonable, to recommend that the current building be demolished and replaced with what was given permission in 2018. May I suggest, as a compromise, that works are carried out which at least get us back to the spirit of the original permission. The overheights are material. It would be practicable because of the structural steel framing to remove the roofs of the wings and glazed winter garden. They could be replaced with flat roofs set at eaves level, which would still maintain some semblance of headroom in the ground floor spaces. Maybe an aside, but we would get rid of the rusty, crinkly tin roof. If the applicant wishes to retain pitched roofs, the usable ground floor space would be reduced by about 50%, and there could be no access onto the balconies. I still maintain that the drive is dangerously steep. I suggest that a narrow driveway be taken down between the garage and the village hall at pre-existing ground levels, such that the garage can be accessed from the south side. The as-built driveway could be infilled, topsoiled and replanted with an apple orchard, which would hide the lowered east wing, as the original photo montages imply. The area between the west wing and road could also be planted with apple trees, which would help to conceal the lowered west wing as well. The road frontage is very relevant. In hindsight, the barn could have been rebuilt to exactly the same dimensions as the original. It had been well surveyed using easily available forest marble stone. I think the barn should be rebuilt in its entirety to match the original, as should the roadside dry stone wall, there using low-grade forest marble stone. The landscaping needs a really good look at as well. We can see people, cars, machinery and buildings which we could never see before because ground levels have been raised. This is not a problem for us, but the residents in Duck Street must have their privacy seriously compromised. I recommend that enforcement action is initiated now. To simply advise the applicant that they proceed at risk has not been sufficient. Sarah Butcher. Following the Planning Committee's very welcome decision not to grant planning permission to the building constructed at Homestead Farm, Bothenhampton, I would like to urge the committee to take enforcement action at the earliest opportunity. That the planning officer involved in this project is recommending against enforcement at this stage is unsurprising. The officer concerned has appeared persistently unwilling to take action and has compelled villagers to invest their own money in surveyors' reports proving the existence of planning infringements evident to the naked eye. Even the report submitted by the officer to this committee in August contained inaccuracies that favoured the owners and their agents, stating that the excess height of bedroom cottage was 0.68 metres, despite a previous acknowledgement by the owner's own planning consultant that the building was 0.89 metres over height. A report commissioned by the village suggests the height excess is actually closer to 1.34 metres over height. Villagers have understandably, therefore, lost confidence in the planning department's ability or willingness to act in their interest. If enforcement action against Homestead Farm is delayed, it will not be for the first time. After very considerable expense of both time and money by Bothenhampton residents, fighting for recognition that this building does not adhere to plans since February 2019, the planning department finally ruled against the height and width infringements in October 2019. 1 year on, nothing has changed. Work has continued apace, with no indication that the owners have any intention of remediating the damage they have done to the centre of this historic village. In section 6.10 of his report, recommending against immediate enforcement, Mr. Rogers suggests that demolition would not be expedient and that the building is capable of being altered to more closely match the approved building. However, it is unclear how this could be achieved without removing entire floors to lower the heights in line with the permission originally granted. Moreover, if whole floors were removed, it would do little to address the fact that the building has been constructed too close to the road and of materials unsympathetic to its surroundings. What, for example, has become of the original stone used in the ancient wall that is a key feature of the village? In short, the continuation of this structure undermines the respect for and integrity of the planning department. The owners and architects have persisted in finishing it off. Indoor cinema installers have now been seen in attendance in the past month, irrespective of the potential for enforcement action to be taken. They appear to feel they can act with impunity. Further delaying enforcement action would appear to vindicate them in this. Alan and Jane Reed. We live directly opposite the main entrance to Homestead Farm and have witnessed the demolition of the derelict farmhouse and rebuilding at first hand. While there has been the inevitable vehicle noise and mess associated with any building site, the builders have always been friendly and well organised, and there has never been loud music and shouting often associated with building sites. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes went out of their way at the start of the project to explain what they were intending to do at the site, took on board comments and adapted their plans to accommodate wherever possible. They worked closely with the Dorset County planners to achieve a compromise between their needs and the planners' requirements. Despite the problems with roof heights that the county planners recommended the building to be completed. Indeed, we were shocked when the planning committee turned down the recent amended application, given the planning department's backing. We do not consider the building, unfinished as it is, to be out of place. It looks like a farmhouse without buildings, which is what it was, and with planting and landscaping at the front and the wall rebuilt, would quickly become an established part of the village. We find it difficult to understand why such a fuss is being made over it. Since the planning application was turned down, Mr. and Mrs. Hughes have been working to winterproof the house to prevent water or cold from damaging the structure, and are now in the process of closing the site down. With no more building work possible, they have again worked with Dorset Council to offer parking to those residents of the village who will be affected by the rebuilding of the wall opposite the site. A thoughtful and generous gesture. We feel that Mr. and Mrs. Hughes have been treated unfairly by some residents of the village, and that they should be given appropriate time to put together an appeal without being steamrollered. We have lived opposite a building site for over 2 years now. Unless the committee approves the completion of the house, we will have to live with the building site and all that entails for many more months, years to come, depending on what is decided. Please, can we have completion of the building work soon? That's all, Chairman.
Thank you, Alison. Sorry for the interruption. We wanted to hear you quite clearly. I now call on Darren Rogers to respond with any salient points he may wish to clarify.
Chairman, I understand that the agent, we've missed out the agent, have we? Has Alison missed out the agent's response?
That's right. Would you like me to?
Yes, please.
That? Yes, thank you.
Yes. It's usually all contained in one presentation.
Thank you. Andy Partridge, agent, on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Hughes. Thank you for allowing us to make representations to the committee against enforcement action. We are appealing against the decision. We have now instructed heritage and ecological experts, as well as other experts, and have clear directions to submit the appeal quickly. It is not in our client's interests to delay matters. Despite the complexity of the design, the case is straightforward. The council has granted planning permission for a replacement dwelling. This sets the benchmark of what the council considers acceptable within the conservation area. The issue, therefore, is whether the change between the approved plans and the as-built development is acceptable. Officers and statutory consultees came to a different conclusion to the council. The difference of opinion illustrates the matter is not conclusive, but more delicately nuanced. The appeal will determine whether the scheme as built is acceptable or not. In the event that the appeal is dismissed, it should also determine which elements are harmful and which are not. It will therefore establish what, if any, degree of harm exists. It will therefore provide clarification of, and we hope an end to the issue. We do recognise the strength of feeling that the development has aroused, and that was very much made plain at committee, which culminated in the refusal of the application. Since then, the only work undertaken with the agreement of officers was to make the building weathertight and put it in a static state, aside from a request by a resident to finish the frontage wall to allow the street sign for Duck Street to be put back up. We accept that this has been done entirely at risk. All work has now ceased on site, pending the outcome of the appeal. Mr. and Mrs. Hughes have, though, offered to make the site available for residents to park their cars at their own risk, while work is being carried out by the council to repair the high pavement. This will be subject to agreement with the Council. Enforcement action by the Council is discretionary. The Council should only issue an enforcement notice where it is expedient to do so under Section 172 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended. We feel that in the above circumstances that it would not be expedient to do so, and moreover that it would be premature to do so before the appeal is determined. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. Sorry for the interruptions. I now call on Darren Rogers to respond with any salient points you may wish to clarify.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the only point to make is that I think clearly this is not a case whereby, for example, planning permission was granted for a bungalow and what's being built is a 2.5 story house, which clearly has a different impact on the character and appearance of an area or amenity of neighbours compared to what was approved. You've seen, as was shown at the August meeting and is shown again today, the differences between as built and as approved, and those differences one could argue are slight or marginal, but they are very subjective, and hence why officers recommended approval for those changes, why committee refused permission for those changes. And having heard the public comments that we've heard here today as well, there are those people that want to kind of go back to kind of square one, but there is in fact a fallback position in terms of the permission that's been granted, whilst others find that the scheme as built is not an issue. So we're talking about subjectivity here and fine margins, and therefore the level and the degree of harm given the issue to do with enforcement action is the expediency test and the degree of harm that is creating, and hence why, Chairman, we are suggesting the option 1 and wait for the appeal decision to run its course and get that decision on the basis that A, it may or may not get permission, and B, the comments of any decision will help to inform what is harmful in terms of the ability to take action at that stage, and hence why we're recommending that first option, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan. Okay, and thank you for that detailed response. Are there any questions of a technical nature for the case officer, please?
I have one, Chairman.
Okay.
Darren, you said in your introduction in relation to the village hall, this was the village hall. Is it still there?
No. The village hall, Vice Chairman, was a building next door to the site.
And it's still there.
It's still there. That building's still there.
Okay. Was a slip of the tongue.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very clear.
Are there any other further questions of a technical nature?
Does Councillor Baldwin and Councillor Weller, are your questions of that nature as indicated by the chairman?
Mine could be of that nature. This is Councillor Baldwin speaking.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Darren, thanks very much for all the work you've done, by the way. I appreciate this is not an easy one for anyone to keep the lid on. Could you just clarify for me those lovely green lines that you drew on the photographs, etc. Where did you get the measurements from for those?
Those are the applicants, Chairman. So we requested from the applicant, as part and parcel of the permission that was refused, to get detailed drawings of the as approved compared to the as built drawings. So they are from the applicant.
Right. Okay. Were they from the applicant when they submitted their NMAs, or from the applicant since? Because I seem to have 3 sets of numbers here. One from a company called Crickmay Stark Architects that's dated 23rd of September 2019, which shows much larger discrepancies in height from either submission from the applicant's surveyor. So should we, hypothetically, if option 3 is chosen, who's going to decide what the height should actually be, and where they're going to be measured from, and who's going to oversee it?
Well, that essentially would be a committee's decision. The John Stark Crick May partnership were third-party representations. I am led to believe that we, as officers, sought as accurate information as we possibly could from the applicant's architect, and the green compared to the as-built drawings that I showed to committee in August and here today are from as an accurate representation from the applicant's architect, Chairman.
Okay, Darren, thanks. You can see where I'm coming from. Being slightly distrustful of which side the measurements came from, it's only natural to question their accuracy, I'm afraid. As I said, there's 2 sets that they've submitted themselves. The ones on the NMAs were actually bigger than the ones that you've got in your report. So,
well, I think there lies the crux of the issue about the subjectivity and the harm issue in terms of what's been, because I think the crucial thing here is to determine what's been built, and is what's been built compared to the approved drawings, is that unacceptable? That's where the subjectivity lies, and hence the option 1 to hold back enforcement action at this stage pending the appeal process.
Sure, I understand this, but what I'm trying to get to is, what height is the building now that we can actually decide whether it's too high or not?
Well, it is what it is. It's been built.
Okay, so we've turned it down, or sorry, the committee turned it down. So is the inspector going to know that the roof height has to be decreased by 60 centimetres, 1.5 centimetres, 2.8 centimetres? You know, this is, how is he going to be able to make an informed decision when we don't actually know the heights of the building as it stands?
Well, the inspector will be given a set of the approved drawings and will be given a set of the as-built drawings. They'll be able to print those off, have scale rules to see exactly what those differences in height are.
I'm still not content with that, but anyway, I'll leave that one for the time being. Yeah, this is my problem with this. Is I don't really understand who's going to police it, and it's okay saying that the inspector will say yes or no, but then when it's actually depending on the decision, hypothetically, if the decision was to reduce the roof heights, we don't know by how much, do we?
Well, we do, because we've got the approved drawings.
But our figures all come from the applicant.
Yes, absolutely. Well, on any scheme that gets submitted for planning permission, it's always an applicant who employs their architect to produce the correct drawings, and it's on that we as officers have to go on.
Sure. Okay. So, but are we confident that the as-built dimensions are as per the NMAs or as per your report?
No, well, they're not. They are as per the report with the green lines and the as-built drawings that I showed on the presentation.
Okay, so the ones that have changed from the NMAs then have got smaller, which is rather interesting. Okay, I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you very much for your help, Darren.
Thank you, Councillor Melba. Councillor, thank you, Darren, for your response. Before I open the debate to members, remembering, of course, that this is subject to possible appeal submissions. So I now open the debate to members. Councillor Pipe, who have we got first on the list to speak?
We still have a technical question, a latecomer question from Councillor Weller, Chairman.
Oh, beg your pardon, do we? Okay,
we do indeed.
I apologise, Councillor Weller.
That's quite all right, Chairman. Thank you. No, it just follows on from what Councillor Baldwin was saying just a moment ago, because I'm not happy with those answers, I'm afraid, Mr. Rogers. The examiner will be looking at those drawings and at the figures that are presented to him. He won't go down to the site necessarily with a tape measure. So he is relying upon the drawings and the figures that he's given, and he's been given 3 lots of figures. How do we know which set of figures? Clearly he will be working upon the figures as approved, but the figures as built don't tally. Which built figures will he go on? Presumably he'll go on the architect who's building the building, but who's to say that those are any more accurate than the architects who have given an independent report? It's really not very satisfactory at all, in my opinion, and that is only my opinion, but it does raise doubts, I think.
Chairman, if I can just try and answer that question. This largely depends on the kind of appeal that's going to be submitted. If this is the subject of a public inquiry, then issues of heights, what was approved, heights compared to being built, etc., will be gone into in terms of proofs of evidence that will be provided, and that will be laid out by the council when they do their proofs of evidence, if it's by way of a public inquiry. But the inspector does take measuring sticks when they're out on site. I can let you know that now, and all of that information will be laid bare as part and parcel of the appeal, if the appeal is by way of inquiry.
Thank you for that reassurance.
Thank you, Darren. That's very kind. As I said, I'll now open the debate to members. So, Councillor Pipe, who have we got first on the list? And you're on mic. You're on mute, I think.
Yeah, my son's just returned from school. I didn't want him to interrupt us without me first saying,
okay.
Quiet. Okay, we have Councillor Jean Dunseith, then myself, and Councillor Weller, Chairman.
Okay, we'll go with Councillor Dunseith first.
Thank you, Chairman. Assuming that there is an appeal and that it does go ahead and that the numbers and the measurements can be agreed upon, I would be quite happy at this moment in time to go with option 1, no enforcement action, in view of the appeal and the amount of interrogation that will happen during that appeal. But if there is no appeal, at the moment, from what I gather, it's being spoken about. It is an aspiration. It hasn't happened yet. Then I would want to go for option 3, for enforcement on specific elements, and specifically the roof height. So those are my comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for your comments, Jean. Okay. Councillor Pike.
Thank you, Chairman. In the submission from the agent, he states that they are appealing, but therefore, in the absence of a lodged appeal, I propose that option 1 be reworded to read.
Okay.
This is my amendment.
Okay.
To not take enforcement action, providing that an appeal is made against a decision to refuse planning permission by the 15th of November 2020. If no appeal is made by the 15th of November 2020, the question of enforcement action will be notified back to this committee at the earliest opportunity. That's the end of my amendment, Chairman. And the reason I put this amendment and those specific dates is that this allows for a report to come back to this committee on our 3rd of December meeting. And I would seek a seconder for that proposal, Chairman, for that amendment to option 1. I beg your pardon.
I would support that, Councillor Pipe.
Thank you, Councillor Dunseith.
That's fine. So we've got a proposal and a seconder for an amendment for option 1. Now, does anyone wish to say anything before I take the vote on that amendment?
Councillor Weller, you did ask to speak. Would you like to speak now or would you like to wait?
No, I'd be very happy to wait until after that amendment, Chairman. Councillor Pipe, thank you.
And Councillor Cocking, Chairman.
I would just like to hear from Anne Collins or Philip Crowther that amendment is legal and that we can actually do that, or do we have to take a vote on the first option?
Right, by all means.
And then now go on to Phil, the legal officer, for his thoughts and response. Or Anne.
Thank you, Chairman. Phil Crowther here. Yes, absolutely. The options before you are only, well, I say only without, the recommendations of the officer about potential options available to you. Members are free to put forward different amendments, such as the one proposed by Councillor Pipe. So that's all fine from a what you're entitled to do perspective.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, so we've got an amendment on the table, duly seconded. I'm now going to put the amendment to option 1 to the vote. So can I take that with Councillor Mike Barron?
In the absence of Councillor Barron at the moment, Chairman, would members like me to repeat my amendment to option 1?
Well, I've got down on my wording is the amendment to option 1 is not to take enforcement action provided that an appeal is made against the decision to refuse planning permission by the 15th of November 2020. If no appeal is made by the 15th of November 2020, then the question of the enforcement action will be reported back to committee at the earliest opportunity. Is that the same wording as you've got?
Pretty much, Chairman. I did use notified rather than reported, but yes.
Okay, I'll change that. That's fine. And okay, so that's the amendment to option 1 as proposed. And I'm now
Chairman, I'm ever so sorry to butt in, but are we saying that if they don't lodge an appeal, then we won't take any enforcement action? But it also depends on the outcome of the appeal, because we want to leave it open to take enforcement action after the appeal, possibly.
How I've read
from my reading, from my hearing of that, it sounds as though we backed ourselves into a corner, taking no action unless they did put an appeal in.
Chairman, can I probably answer that question? It's Darren Rogers here again.
Carry on, Darren.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dunseith, I think the recommendation from Councillor Pipe is basically saying that if the appeal has not been lodged by that date, the 15th of November, then a report will be put back to you in December, and then you will be free then, in the knowledge that that appeal has not been made by that date, to then consider taking enforcement action.
That is the essence of my amendment to option 1, Councillor Dunseith.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, I'm clear now. Thank you. Yes, I'm still seconding it. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Right, okay, we're going to take that roll call again, and hopefully Mike Barron's back again. Mike Barron, Councillor Mike Barron.
In favour, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
On balance, in favour, Chair.
On balance, thank you. Councillor Susan Cockin.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. For clarity, Councillor Jean Dancer.
In favour, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Bill Pipe.
In favour, Chairman.
Proposal, so you'll be in favour, I should imagine.
Indeed.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
I'm for it, please.
Okay. Councillor Louis and Louis.
In favour, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Kate Dweller.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Williams.
In favour.
Councillor John Worth.
In favour.
And I'm also in favour as well. So it's unanimously in favour to amend option 1. So option 1 now reads as was described. So we're now going to take the vote.
There are no further people wishing to speak, Chairman. You are open to that option.
Okay, we'll now take the vote as laid out in the schedule with the amendment to option 1. So the
Sorry,
proposal...
Chair, to interrupt, but if we've just approved an amendment, how can we vote on another option?
There isn't an option. No. So the amendment to option 1 was the amendment to that particular proposal.
Chairman, it's Phil Crowther. If it helps, my understanding was that Councillor Pipe made a standalone proposal which happened to be an amendment to option 1, but there was no. It was the only proposal that was on the table. So my understanding is that that's the proposal that's been made, and that's the decision that committee have made.
So therefore, you're saying, Phil, that now becomes the substantive motion alone.
Yes, Chairman. So it's the substantive motion that members have voted on. I don't think, unless Denise has a different view, I don't think there's a need to take another vote on it.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's my understanding, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, that's in that case then, because I was going to take a vote on the amendment and then take a vote on the proposal, but obviously that's not pointed out. I'm on a learning curve as well. So that concludes that particular application.
You did very well, Chairman.
Oh, thank you very much. We're going grey by the day. Okay, now we're going to take item 7 on the agenda. That's WP 2000417 of the TL, which is a telecommunication mast in Weymouth Way, Radical Weymouth. It's the installation of 18-metre high monopole supporting 6 in number antenna and 3 in number equipment cabinets and ancillary developments. I'm now going to call on Hugh Williams, the case officer, to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chairman. I shall try to share my screen. Is that now showing?
Well, not on mine at the moment,
No.
but mine has been a bit slow responding this morning. Can everyone else see presentation?
It's not up.
No.
Chairman.
No, just
I
initial.
I find
Just
the
your initials.
Just
Okay.
HW.
Okay. I find the request control button disappears when I need it, and, and then it was literally there 30 seconds before I sought to share my screen. Can anybody prompt me as to how you recover it?
Anyone technical listening in to the meeting?
Hugh, if you just hover over the middle of the screen, it's Anne. It should bring up the little bar of options again.
Yeah,
and you can just choose to share the desktop.
While this continues, Chairman, it's worth noting that Councillor John Worth left the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Bill. At what time, may I ask?
The message, I am sorry, I have to leave the meeting at 15:16 hours.
15:16. Thank you very much.
We've got it now, Hugh. If you just
Lovely.
share it from the beginning,
Okay.
that's worked. Thank you.
Oh, that's it.
Great. Okay. So this is an application for a determination as to whether the prior approval of the council is required as to the siting and appearance of proposed developments involving the installation of electronic communications apparatus and development ancillary to radio equipment housing. The application is not an application for planning permission, such that the acceptability in principle of the proposal is not a relevant matter for consideration today. The key matters in this determination whether approval as to the siting and or the appearance of the development is necessary, and if so, and in particular having regard to the determination deadline, whether the siting and appearance as detailed in the application is acceptable. In contemplating the determination, it's important to recognise that the application before you contains more information and detail about the proposed development than is required as the minimum in the relevant legislation, such that the application contains a lot of the information that might otherwise have been requested to help inform the decision. It's also important to stress that when development is carried out as permitted development under Part 16 of the General Permitted Development Order, that such development is subject to conditions that are set out in the development order. Those conditions include a requirement that development must be carried out in accordance with the details set out either within the application as presented or as otherwise approved through the prior approval process, so that there's no need to require approval of details of either siting or appearance simply in order to establish control over how the development is undertaken. Those controls are set out in the legislation and are not necessary. It's not necessary to supplement them. Turning to the details of the application proposal itself, the subject application relates to land to the north of the Manor Road roundabout road junction that connects the A354 Weymouth Relief Road and the B3159 Dorchester Road in north of Weymouth. Two monopole-style telecommunications masts are currently present in the highway verge in this location, one being approximately 12 metres tall and the other being approximately 15 metres tall. The masts stand within a relatively wide area of highway verge, with the roundabout and the A354 to the south, and a residential street, Greenway Road, off Dorchester Road, being to the north. The highway verge rises to the north and is backed by a belt of trees, beyond which there's a public bridleway that also serves as part of the National Cycle Network. The 2015 aerial photograph of the area illustrates the local context, including the road infrastructure, the wide verge area, the bridleway to the north, and the housing beyond. The nearest houses to the application area are in Greenway Road, approximately 30 metres from the application area. The wider context of the site includes the Morrison supermarket to the south of the roundabout, opposite which is further residential development, further housing to the west of the application area, and the main entrance to Radipole Primary School, which is located approximately 250 metres from the application area, with the school building and other school facilities further away. The Redlands Community Sports Hub is approximately 500 metres from the application site, and the Wey Valley School, the Wyvern Academy and St Nicholas and St Lawrence Primary Schools are further to the north. In terms of the land use context, the application area lies entirely within the development boundary for Weymouth as defined in the adopted local plan, wherein policy SUS2 provides that residential, employment and other development to meet the needs of the local area will normally be permitted. The area is regarded as being at low risk of both fluvial and surface water flooding, and no part of the application area or any immediately adjoining areas are designated for their nature conservation importance. The Radipole Community Woodland Local Nature Reserve is located approximately 220 metres to the southwest of the application area, shown here outlined in purple. And the Lawton Meadows Site of Special Scientific Interest is located at its nearest point approximately 250 metres to the northeast. The application area is within the risk assessment zone of the Lawton Meadows SSSI, but the entirety of the local area is located within SSSI risk assessment zones, these being the purple lines on this plan. And the more important point in this regard is that the proposed development is not of a form requiring consultation with Natural England on account of its location, on account of its proximity to the SSSI and the potential for development to adversely impact on either species or habitats. There are no designated heritage assets within or in the immediate vicinity of the application area. The nearest designated heritage asset being the Radipole Conservation Area, the closest boundary of which is approximately 200 metres from the application site. And there are no listed buildings within 500 metres of the application area. The public bridleway adjacent to the application site provides pedestrian cycle access into the Lawton Meadows SSSI. And further connects to Littlemore. Highway underpasses provide traffic-free connections under the A354 and the other local roads, being Dorchester Road to the north of the roundabout, and again the A354 to the west. A number of respondents to the application have highlighted the volume of pedestrian and cycle movements in the local area, including those associated with the local schools. In addition to the existing telecommunications masts adjacent to the roundabout, around the roundabout and along the connecting roads and public bridleway are other vertically engineered structures, including lighting columns and highway signage. This photograph being from the access to the A354 underpass to the west of the roundabout, and this one being from the southwest of the roundabout alongside Dorchester Road. Looking east from Greenway Road, close to its junction with Dorchester Road, the tree belt behind the site helps to filter, soften, or even totally screen views of the roadside infrastructure. And the A354 itself is not a visually prominent feature looking in this direction, even this close to the roundabout junction. The existing site plan presented within the application shows the location of the existing monopole, that in time it would be removed, existing radio equipment housing, cabinets at various locations within the verge area, and also the line of an existing acoustic barrier fence. The fence line is also apparent on the aerial photograph, as too is the existing mast and some of the cabinets. The proposed site plan indicates the location of the proposed monopole within a wraparound base cabinet outlined in blue. 3 further equipment cabinets outlined in green, and the existing monopole and an existing equipment cabinet that are to be removed outlined in brown. The new cabinets would be painted green and the replacement mast would be painted grey. I believe that the proposal is adequately and accurately described and explained in the report before you, but a number of respondents to the application have indicated some confusion and uncertainty over various aspects of the proposal. To be clear, the application provides for the upgrading by its replacement of the lower of the two existing monopoles with the higher, with a higher and rather more substantial monopole mast that is to be positioned approximately 17 metres to the west of the existing pole to be removed. There would be a period in which 3 communications masts would be present to the northeast of the roundabout before the lowest of the masts would then be removed. The existing 15-metre mast, which is located further to the east of the area shown on the existing site plan or in this elevation drawing, is used by a different network operator and is expected to be retained. The existing elevation drawing also shows the positioning of the acoustic fence and the height of the existing monopole in approximation relative to the height of the existing trees. The proposed elevation shows the same details with the addition of the proposed new mast clearly being a taller and somewhat more substantial structure than the existing mast. The new mast would support 2G, 3G, 4G and 5G antennae. It's explained in the application that the desired network coverage cannot be achieved without positioning the 5G antennas higher than the other antennas on the mast and also vertically separated from them. So the 5G antennae are those essentially shown in green here, and they're positioned approximately 3 meters above the top of the highest point of the other antennas on the mast. To accommodate the 5G antennas and the associated feeder cables, the monopole also needs to be slightly wider than the existing mast, and unlike the existing structure, the antennas would not be fully enclosed within a glass fibre shroud. However, the application does provide that the proposed design is the slimmest possible to enable all technologies to be supported from this site, and that if the column and the shroud width were any slimmer, another radio base station, i.e. another mast, would be required. In terms of the appearance of the head frame, having been developed to additionally accommodate 5G antennas, the head frame will look slightly different to the rather more discrete fiberglass shields that have become very commonplace in many locations in urban areas over recent years. These 2 photographs have been provided by the applicant to illustrate a recent 20-metre mast installation in Manchester that supports a similar head frame to that proposed in Weymouth. And again, the design of these head frames is such that the 5G antennae are towards the top and above the 2G to 4G antennae lower down the mast. Turning to updates since publication of the committee report, section 9.4 of the published report incorrectly indicates that no response had been received from the council's highway liaison engineer. This should have indicated that the Highway Authority considers that the proposals do not present a material harm to the transport network or to highway safety, and that consequently they have no objection. Apologies for that error in my report. 2 written statements opposing the recommendation and 1 written statement supporting the recommendation have been received in accordance with the public participation protocol, and I believe those have already been circulated to members and will be read out subsequently. We have additionally received 2 further representations objecting to the application, the content of which is outlined in the update sheet. Both representations encourage the committee to invoke the precautionary principle and request that the application be refused. Having considered the further representations, I don't consider that any change is necessary to the recommendation before you. The main considerations in the determination that you're being asked to make relate to conformity with national and local planning policy for communications development, and in particular to the adequacy of the justification for the proposal, the provision and adequacy of other background information in support of the application, the impact of the proposed development on the character and appearance of the site and the surrounding area, and whether there are any technically feasible alternatives that would meet the identified development need with less visual and/or overall environmental harm. For the reasons set out in the report, I am satisfied that the proposal is in accordance with the most relevant policies of the development plan, and that there are no material considerations indicating that the application should be determined other than in accordance with the development plan. In my opinion, this is a good location for communications development, and I don't believe that a better alternative has been suggested that would meet the development need with any less visual or overall environmental impact. Many of the representations received relate to health and health implications for health and related concerns. The application is supported by a declaration of conformity with International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection Guidelines. And paragraph 116 of the National Planning Policy Framework is very clear that local planning authorities must determine applications on planning grounds only. They should not seek to prevent competition between different operators, question the need for an electronic communication system, or set health safeguards different from the International Commission guidelines for public exposure. I don't propose to explain in detail the International Commission guidelines, but believe that the most important matters in this regard are that the International Commission is an independent committee of scientific experts established to evaluate the state of knowledge about the effects of non-ionising radiation on human health, including well-being, and on the environment, that the Commission aims to provide adequate advice on protection against adverse health effects from both short and long-term exposure to non-ionising radiation, and uses the WHO's definition of health, this being that health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That the Commission's advice is based on a detailed evaluation of scientific evidence. Scientifically substantiated adverse health effects are identified and exposure limits are developed to prevent these from occurring. For the estimation of exposure limit, the Commission generally assumes worst case situations and takes uncertainties in the scientific evidence into consideration. And the final point to make in respect of the INC-IRP protection guidelines is that the principles from the Commission published in March of this year note that the key driver for both ionising and non-ionising radiation protection is to prevent harm to people and the environment. For humans, the aim is to provide protection of all individuals, whereas for the environment it is to protect species, ecosystems and biota against adverse effects. The process of radiation protection includes making informed decisions even if full knowledge about the risks associated with exposure is not available. The applicant's submission of the Declaration of Conformity with ICNIRP public exposure guidelines is sufficient to demonstrate compliance with government planning policy in respect of potential health effects from the planned operation of the proposed development. Paragraph 183 of the NPPF is clear that the focus of planning decisions should be on whether proposed development is an acceptable use of land, rather than the control of processes or emissions, where these are subject to separate pollution control regimes, and that planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively. It's not the role of planning authorities to regulate radiation or radio waves, responsibility for such matters resting primarily with Ofcom and Public Health England. In this instance, the relevant development that the relevant planning considerations concern the siting and appearance of the proposed development. The recommendation, in my view, the siting and appearance detailed in the application is acceptable, and the applicant should therefore be informed that Dorset Council's prior approval as the local planning authority is not required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Hugh. That's very comprehensive. I now invite Alison Sharp again in order to read out all of the written representations received from members of the public and local authorities.
Thank you, Chair. Mary Jordan Winter. 1. The proposed 18-metre high 5G monopole, by reason of its increased height and bulk, would have a significant harmful visual impact in the surrounding area. In addition, the proposed cabinets will have a cluttered appearance and detract from the open character of the area. The key characteristic of the locality of the proposed application site is its openness as the gateway to Weymouth. 2. This application was passed by Weymouth Town Council even though there was missing documentation and no consultation or correspondence with environmental groups and residents. Local residents are most unhappy about this lack of consultation. The only notification appears to be a planning notice pinned to a lamp post, partially hidden from view near the cycle public footpath off Greenway Road towards 2 Mile Copse. 3. As a popular tourist destination, Weymouth Council encourages cycling, walking and outdoor pursuits across the town, which will result in a very busy area, uncomfortably close to the site of the proposed 5G monopole. The proposed site, adjacent to the public footpath, is close to many residential houses, Morrison's supermarket and a light industrial area. 4. Radipole Primary School is in the vicinity, yet consultation was deemed not applicable. The documentation citing no schools nearby. Along the Dorchester Road is a nursery, special needs school, St Nicholas and St Lawrence Primary School and Wey Valley Academy. A large number of students pass this roundabout twice daily, either on foot, bicycle, car or bus. This is concerning as exposure to RFs, EMFs has now been determined by scientists to be detrimental to health and well-being, particularly for children and young people. 5. Regarding ICNIRP certification, no such ICNIRP certificate exists. ICNIRP neither endorse nor produce a certificate for submission with any planning application. Their website says categorically that ICNIRP does not provide or issue certificates to verify the safety of any device or installation. Thus, any telecoms company or their contractors submitting an ICNIRP certificate with a planning application before a local authority are falsifying safety assurances and committing a fraudulent act. 6. As a new technology, 5G goes far beyond a straightforward planning discussion. As councillors, you need to carefully consider your duty of care to the community and environment when reaching any decision, and must act in the best interest of the people. 7. Please reject this application and invoke the precautionary principle until such time as independent research proves 5G to be safe. Roma Harding. 1. Regarding the implementation of 5G technology, have any adverse health or environmental considerations been taken into account as documented by peer-reviewed science? 2. There are currently 2 existing 11.7 metre structures on the proposed site. The application is to replace one existing structure with a new 5G 18 metre high monopole. No mention is made in the documentation or plan to the second 11.7 metre structure. What is to happen to this second existing structure needs to be clarified. The proposed 18 metre monopole and cabinets will have an extremely detrimental impact on visual amenity and will not be sympathetically designed and camouflaged. 3. At the Weymouth Town Council meeting on 28th July, one of the councillors quoted in part from the World Health Organization, WHO, no adverse health effect has been causally linked with exposure to wireless technologies. The rest of this statement was admitted, which misled those present. The WHO statement continues, so far, only a few studies have been carried out at the frequencies to be used by 5G. 4. It should be borne in mind that WHO and ICNIRP guidelines are just that, guidelines, and not safety standards. WHO relies on ICNIRP for its guidelines, which do not constitute legislation or law. A disclaimer on ICNIRP's website states, ICNIRP does not guarantee the correctness, liability or completeness of the information and views published. 5. Although planning does not consider the health effects regarding 5G technology, it should be acknowledged that 5G is classified by WHO as a possible carcinogen 2B. 6. Regarding technical performance specifications, none have been provided to identify the power density and frequency emissions of the equipment at various bandwidths. These are required by NPPF. The applicant also omits to declare compliance with ISO standards. Will this information be requested? 7. The application site is located within a SSSI risk assessment zone. Have risk assessments regarding 5G technology been carried out, and if so, by whom? Assessments relevant to this application in accordance with SSSI impact risk zones are required for A. Large non-residential developments outside existing settlements, urban areas. B. Residential development of 50 units or more. C. Any development that could cause air pollution. This includes 5G frequencies. 8. I appeal to your conscience to consider your responsibilities of duty of care. Weymouth should not be a test ground for this untested and uninsurable new technology. Please reject this planning application and invoke the precautionary principle until such time as independent research concludes 5G technology to be safe. Vicky Parsons, Agent. The existing site is being upgraded in order to provide 5G coverage to the surrounding area, where there is currently no such provision, in line with the government's aspirations for the UK to be world leader in 5G. The existing mast is not capable of being upgraded to provide 5G, as the new technology would not be able to fit in the existing column. And because the signal attenuation of 5G is greater, the radio frequency is higher, which requires a taller height to clear nearby urban clutter and trees. This is the most sensitive design which will be able to provide the latest 5G technologies to the area. It remains a simple, functional, vertical structure and will be able to assimilate with the other linear structures in the street scene. 5G will provide faster, more reliable network coverage to this area and has social and economic benefits for local residents and visitors, and supports growth in productivity, efficiency and labour force participation across the whole economy. The proposed installation meets NPPF requirements in relation to health. An ICNIRP certificate has been submitted with the application, and therefore health matters should not be considered further in the determination of this application, in line with paragraph 116 of the NPPF. Matt Warman MP highlighted in a keynote speech at Connected Britain 2020 on the 23rd of September 2020 that he fully supports the government's work with the telecoms industry to bring 5G into the area and the importance of good quality communications, which most had first-hand experience of the value of during lockdown, when it was a lifeline to many to keep in touch with friends and family, and to allow working from home. Without the operators' work to continually invest in upgrading sites, customers will be increasingly unable to use their handheld devices for the purposes in which they were purchased, whenever and wherever they are for whatever reason, as demand on the network increases and capacity to deal with it reduces. Without 5G, this part of Weymouth will fall further behind the rest of the country and lose out from the well-documented social and economic benefits that next generation connectivity brings. In addition to the support from central government, the 5G Rural Dorset initiative provides support for next generation mobile infrastructure within Dorset. Although this particular mast will not form part of the trial, it will allow for this area of Weymouth to benefit from the advantages of a faster, more reliable network. A letter from Matt Warman was also submitted as part of the application, detailing the advantages of 5G in relation to superfast broadband, which is an issue at the forefront of the 5G Rural Dorset initiative. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Alison. Thank you for your support this afternoon. Okay, and now call on Hugh Williams to respond with any salient points he may wish to clarify. I think you might be on mute, Hugh. Are you on mute, Hugh?
Sorry, Chairman. Too many buttons having the same effect.
Okay.
Nothing to add, Chair, to the earlier presentation, save to sort of reinforce that the focus of this determination is firstly on whether or not further information as to siting and design is necessary. In my view, it isn't. But if the council's approval is required, if the committee feels that they do have a need to approve siting and appearance of this proposal, that we do have a statutory deadline by which that approval either needs to be given or refused, and without the applicant's further extension of that period, we only have a couple of days left. So whilst the recommendation is that we do not need to require, we do not need to consider the approval or refusal, if members feel differently, I would suggest that they do that today based on the information that's in front of them.
Thank you, Hugh. That's very kind. Okay, members, are there any questions of a technical nature for the case officer for Hugh?
I have no questions at the moment, Chairman.
Okay.
From members, I might add.
Okay. Just a quick question from me, Hugh. I noticed behind the site of the monopole, there's a fence, which is a sound reduction fence. I was just wondering the reason for that and why that's there. It's an acoustic fence.
Yes, I believe the acoustic fence, the fencing is there as an acoustic barrier. It will have been implemented as part of the highway development. I don't know the details of the justification for it, but the two sort of sensitive uses that you're effectively defending there are the public right of way in the context of the bridleway and the housing beyond. I suspect, given its positioning, it may have more to do with the bridleway than the housing, but I don't know for sure.
Well, where I was coming from, of course, is would the installation of the new monopole disturb that in any way, and whether that would have any implications on the housing the other side?
No, Chair. The proposed site plan. Sorry. It's slightly difficult to show, but the fence is following this line here, adjacent to the trees, whereas the proposed developments are all well forward of the fence. There would be no impact on the fence at all.
Thank you for that. That was completing my question.
Councillor makes a salient point within the chat bar, Chairman, where she says that the acoustic fence was erected at the time when the relief road was built. It extends the length right the way to the Littlemore roundabout, in fact.
All right. Good. Interesting. Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. I'm now going to open the debate to members. So, Councillor Piper, who have we got first to speak?
Nobody, Chairman. So, in the light of nobody wishing to speak, and planning approval is not required as it's a permitted development under Class A of Part 60 of the GPDO, and permitted development allows for up to 25 metres for a single vertical engineered structure, I propose we move to the recommendation.
So you're proposing then?
I am indeed.
Councillor Pipe. Okay, do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chair, David Baldwin.
Thank you, David.
Okay. We have a proposal and a seconder on the table. I'm now going to take a vote by roll call. I start off by Councillor Mike Burren.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor David Bolwell. For clarification.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yeah, in favour, Chair.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Susan Cocking?
In favour, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Thank Councillor Jean Dunseth.
In favour, Chair.
Thank you, Jean. Councillor Bill Pike, for clarity.
In favour, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Nick Ireland.
In favour.
Councillor Louis O'Leary has left the meeting, so we'll skip that particular name. Councillor Kate Weller.
For.
Thank you, Kate. And Councillor Sarah Williams.
In favour.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm in favour as well. So that makes 10 in favour. Is that correct, Sam?
Yes, I agree, Chair. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. That concludes the final item on the agenda, item 7, and thank you for your help. Right, we now go on to item 8 on the agenda, appeals decision. Now, there's not going to be a presentation of this, but members, I direct your attention to the noticed appeals and appeal decisions, particularly with regard to material considerations and how it will impact on the future deliberations. The one that's listed in your pack is actually quite is of interest. Item 9 on the agenda is urgent items, and I have no prior notification of any item of business which is considered to be urgent pursuant to section 100B 4B of the Local Government Act 1972. Members, that concludes the meeting. Thank you for your indulgence. It's been a long meeting. Thank you for supporting me on one of my very first ventures into this role. And I now close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.